how up to date Greater Anglia are on their sustainability strategies. I don't know if Mike has.
I think
has
it'll depend. Well, I suspect it probably both county and city who might have some involvement in this. It depends what and forgive me, I don't remember what was said was to be done. Maybe we need to be clear about the notes. But if it's the property around the station, that'd be Network Rail. If it's actually the rail usage, that could be one of a number of different companies. So it's probably just trying to be, we might need to get more detail on what's required for that one, Mana.
Yeah, I think also another thing, because I was very heavily involved in the creation of Cambridge North Station, in terms of the sort of the actual infrastructure of the station itself, it's probably a little bit late to address that now easily, but maybe if the Eco Council were interested in kind of that topic of just, regardless of whether it was electrification of the surrounds or the station itself, targeting Cambridge South Station via Network Rail would be the place to go to and start campaigning on that now.
Yeah.
The consultation on the very early plans for Cambridge South, but did go live, I think, about a week ago.
Yeah,
and I think runs until late in November.
Does everyone here know what Cambridge South Station is? Just nod or shake your heads, or yeah, okay. Sorry, Josh.
No, that was pretty much it. Is that yeah, like Ian said, how much remit any of us have to actually influence or change the existing stations, but with a new station about to be built. Well, I say about in a few years' time around the hospital and the biomedical campus. With a live consultation right now, we can certainly get those details over to you guys to feed in, and I'm trying to remember exactly where the details are. They'd be on the City Council's website. I'm sure we can find those.
I think it probably, I don't know if we're going to come on to it, Lana, later on, but it's probably about how you're able to influence planning full stop. And you might want to task all three of us as councillors to go back to, there's a new Cambridge plan being prepared conjointly between South Cambs and the city. And I think we might want to try and ensure that young people are able to have a voice, and we can approach the officers concerned to ensure some sort of negotiation is held whereby you're able to influence the plan. I think it's really important that I mean, other planning processes allow this to happen, so there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. But you might want to hold, I don't know, all three of us to account for that one, because it's about well, probably me and Josh, actually, because it's about the city and the South Cambs doing it. So we could probably go away and find out how you're able to influence planning. How does that sound?
Yeah, and I can certainly support it, because there was a lot of stuff that was fixed early on in the pre-planning stage with the development of Cambridge North. So I can help with that if Josh and Mike take on the local plan aspects.
Yeah.
Okay. So moving on, you also mentioned 8,000 houses would need to be, or would want to be retrofitted, but that's an expensive process, and you were trying to find a balance between that. So how many out of those 8,000 would be able to reasonably be retrofitted before your net zero target of 2050?
Well, now that I suspect is me, and we are just starting to try and price how much that'll cost, and how we're going to afford it. If we're serious as a council about going carbon neutral by 2050, then we have no choice. We have to find the money. But we're having to now start to seriously plan it now as to how to do that. And if we want to try before any earlier than 2050, we're going to have to find money even sooner. It's really, this is actually, for us, for the City Council, this goes to very much Ian and Josh might want to come in, but this goes to the heart of if we were serious or not. And the question is how long it'll take and how much money it'll find. The thing to feed back to you is we're having those conversations now within the executive group to try and start to put together a proper plan.
Yeah, I think this
all depends on the money, Liana. That's the key. It's how we find the money, because it'll cost millions and millions and millions.
Yeah, and I think everyone would join me in hoping that the central government, whichever party controls it over the next 30 years, will help on that front. But I think we won't hold our breath for the time being. But then this comes back to something I know we all discussed a bit last time, and the idea of road mapping to that net zero target. But because it's quite a complex kind of political structure in Cambridge, there are all sorts of different things that we can control, that we can maybe part control, and that we can affect by pushing the agenda and lobbying, and things like maybe we could decarbonize our office buildings as a council by installing solar panels, making them more efficient and so on. And perhaps we could do that easily by 2030. Bigger projects like retrofitting, we need serious expertise and brought on. That doesn't mean that we don't, like Mike said, need the plan and need to work out where the money's coming from, whether that's government, whether that's very very fancy forms of borrowing that is a bit beyond my area of expertise at the minute. But no, it all comes down to that sort of, where are we now, where do we need to go, and making sure we have that plan.
I think Josh is right. If I can just, sorry, Luana, that your fifth pledge, your fifth demand about a climate plan, that's the one that will hold us to account as councillors.
Okay.
That's the one that will, as I think Josh was hinting, that's the one that will force us to find the money, or how much it'll cost to deliver against retrofitting. And again, without wishing to give too much away, retrofitting is the hardest thing for us to do, because new developments, we have more control over how that's done. But retrofitting, big stuff.
Okay. So you also mentioned that 30% of emissions within Cambridge come from housing. Is that the highest figure? Or if it isn't, what is? And if it is, how can we lower it?
I can jump in on the figures, certainly. So the highest level of figures we have was a project done by some Cambridge University students that Ian was involved in a couple of years ago. And so transport is roughly a third. Housing is about, let me make sure I get the numbers right. I think so. Business and industry is essentially the largest contributor in Cambridge. Ian, I'm sure, can jump in and maybe give exact numbers, but it is roughly a third between business, transport, and housing.
I'd have to rapidly look it up, which I'm doing now. It might be interesting if I just send you a link to their report to have a look at.
Okay. So in the, let's say, 10, 20 years, how would you go about lowering those emissions?
With regards to which bit, Luana? What are you asking?
Well, transport seems like the easiest one to fix, roughly.
You want to take that one first, Ian, as it's county? How
I can have a stab. I mean, it's a very, very, very large question, I have to say. I mean, I can say some sort of, I'm worried about saying, essentially, I'm slightly worried about saying sort of glib things about more walking and cycling, better public transport, none of which I think anyone would view as sort of amazing insights. I mean, there are a lot of challenges around things like people hoping that new technologies will come in and sort all the problems out, not recognizing things like electric cars aren't the solution, because they bring their own complexities. I mean, I think possibly the thing, it depends what sort of, whether you're looking at a time scale of what, because the important thing is doing stuff now, because it's doing stuff now has more of an impact over time. I mean, one of the things I think we all need to try and find ways of reducing this car dependency, which is something we talked about last time. I think it was a question Magnus asked about, or maybe it was Ginny actually, and related to these, we've got these active travel at the moment where we've got sort of low traffic neighbourhoods. We've got things like restricting car access to various areas, which the idea is designed to kind of trying to discourage those journeys that are not essential, so that people will have a sort of nudge to take an alternative route, whether that's public transport or walking or cycling. And the challenge for us as councillors is that's balanced against, the very real needs of people who are, for various reasons, vulnerable and therefore have to use cars to get around, and how that impacts them.
The thing I noticed while both anecdotally going from school and home is that most motorists in Cambridge don't really care, or like they don't notice bus lanes, cycle lanes, advanced starting lines. If there aren't cyclists on them, they won't care about the painted lines don't matter unless there are other cars next to them.
Yeah, I mean, painted lines are useless. It sounds a bit arrogant, but I'm quite proud that two of the only three properly physically segregated cycle lanes in Cambridge are in my division. And by properly segregated, I mean physical curbs, not sort of. Wouldn't count Huntington Road, for example, which is a decent cycle scheme. It's got this sort of 45-degree angle style.
Cambridge curve. Cambridge curb, yeah. I think they call it.
And basically the problem with that is any vehicle can easily go into it without any real problem. So it's not a protected thing. It's better than what you described, Lana, but it's not exactly great. So I'd completely, and the constraint is always space, and trying to find ways around that, and confronting the difficult conversation, which is that if you're going to solve the problem, you've got constraints of space, somebody's got to lose out. And if you want to promote walking and cycling, that has to be car drivers. So it's doing that in a way that carries people with you and allows the change to go through.
Because, I know down roughly where Goinville Hotel is, that is a 3-lane road. And there's a bus, there's a short bus lane down Station Road. So surely at least one of the options would possibly be to make one of those lanes a bus lane, or a long, large cycle lane.
Yep. So one of the things I've been going on about for 6 or 7 years is doing experimental schemes. The problem with all these things, I think Mike and Josh will agree, is that the wheels of local government turn very slowly, and sometimes for very good reason. But in transport matters particularly, it can be far too slowly, and so slow that you can't do anything particularly radical. But if you can try stuff out first, which is what what I've been pushing for years, and what the active travel stuff is allowing, then suggestions like yours, Luana, you can try it as a concept. And rather than having all those sort of silly sort of discussions where people go, oh no, if you do that, it will bung up all the traffic on this side of Cambridge, or it will make everything worse. You can try it for a relatively short period. And if it does have the negative effect, then yes, you go away and you rethink it and you remove it. But if it doesn't, suddenly those kind of upfront objections can go away. So I think it's a great idea. And
I think Ian's right. Local government is very slow, or can be. And we're also, if I'm honest, risk averse. So we're unwilling to take risks in terms of trying innovative things. I think the other bit I'd say is we do need to learn from abroad. So the Swiss, the Dutch in particular, have very much more advanced cycling schemes, and we need to learn from them and be prepared to take the risks. But that can be, I think, as Ian said, can be hard work.
Just to completely agree with Mike, is that we are risk averse, and of course the reason we're risk averse is because there's so many ways in local authorities can be held legally culpable. I mean, just to give you one little random example that might give you the sort of insight, there's a speed bump in my division that's got, someone's tried to rip it out of the ground. It's nailed down. Someone's trying to rip it out of the ground. The nail is sticking up a tiny little bit, and I've got loads of people in my Facebook group demanding recompense from the county council because allegedly they got their wheels damaged by this little nail sticking up. So there's lots of examples where we are, as Mike said, we are naturally forced into being risk averse, and it's frustrating.
You also mentioned that you wanted solar panels fitted to new houses, which contradicts something in your 2016 to 2021 video, where you stated that you wanted green roofs on all new houses. Why is there a discrepancy?
When you say, I think this probably is the city, I suspect. I'd need to go away and find out. I think I could make a stab at a guess in that it's about the technology changes and shifts, and our commitment is to make things as green as possible. So I can only guess.
Nobody else had the problem, so.
Sorry, somebody else coming in. Forgive me. I've got
Marcus
Marcus on the line. Are you wanted to speak, Marcus? Sorry. No, should I just plough on? Sorry, I can see Marcus's picture in the frame. I think it's to do with technology, Luana, is my guess. Is that therefore what might have been agreed in 2016 might be better done a different way in 2021, but I don't know, so I'll find out. Do you know if it was the City Council that made those promises?
I'm not completely sure. It might. I'll have to recheck the channel the video was uploaded onto.
Okay.
Another guess might be because 2016 to 2021 would have been the city's climate change strategy that is just about to expire and be refreshed in March of next year. We spoke last time about so we just voted through the outline for the consultation that's going to go live. I checked a couple of days ago, in the next few weeks, and like I promised last time, you guys will be involved in that process, sort of from the off, not just in having the link and being able to write in and all of that. But I think because we obviously don't have that much time this evening. So am I still coming through clearly? Because my my screen's going haywire a little bit. We don't have that much time, especially to discuss all of your demands. What I was going to suggest, and this is something me and Mike can chase up with the relevant council officers, is we're planning a series of workshops, so longer sessions, as part of putting together this climate change strategy. I think it'd be fantastic if between the City Council and yourselves as the Eco Council, we could sort of jointly facilitate one specifically designed at bringing in young people. So absolutely, as Mike said, we need to bring in young people to the local plan process, which is looking at 2024. But we have another strategy that's going to be critical up and for the time from now and until then, that it would be great to have you guys as involved as possible.
Okay, so
Luana, can I just say, if Josh is content, we'll do. It's unusual for us to work cross-party, but sometimes it's really important to do so. So if you hold Josh and I jointly accountable to work together to get your voice heard on the plan, are you happy to do that, Josh? Yeah,
absolutely, Mike.
Moving on to the next item, Ginny will reread our demands and then we will discuss them.
Hey, hi, it's good to see you all again. Thank you for joining us on this meeting. So there are 7 demands that I mentioned in the last meeting. I'm just sort of going to go over them again. So the first one was to pledge to confirm that the council will never develop on the green belt. The second one was to commit to carbon neutrality well before 2030. So making a clear, honest commitment to becoming completely carbon neutral and following through. So reporting transparently to the public every 6 months. The third one was ensuring local climate finance. So collecting carbon taxes to be spent on climate change programs. The fourth one was supporting local renewables. So scaling up initiatives to converting all roofs in newly developed housing and current housing in Cambridge to living green, solar, or heat reflective white, and supporting sustainable buildings. The fifth one was making a publicly available climate plan for the next decade. So that includes making regular updates on the plan and implementing on local levels together with the advisory council. The sixth one was making local green transport accessible. So using inspiration from previous successful initiatives, making buses and transport systems net zero, and then reducing the cost of public transport and making it more reliable. This includes giving access to underprivileged groups such as the elderly, children, the disabled, so as many people as possible don't have to use cars. And then the final one is supporting local and independent businesses. So giving them full advice and support, both physically and financially, to do business in a net zero way. So for example, replacing plastics or offering reusable bags to small businesses, that type of thing. And yeah, that's all 7 of them. So thank you.
Okay, so we can start by discussing the first one, which was never developing on the green belt.
Can I make a point on that?
I almost feel I should say for 2 city councillors here and jump.
Hold on. Yes, Jeanette?
I saw you.
So, yeah, in recent months, I have noticed that some politicians have suggested potentially building on the green belt. People who are involved in Cambridge politics have proposed can we potentially use the green belt in developing on the green belt to help the environment? But I would like to make it clear that the best way to use the green belt to help the environment is to not build on it. The whole purpose of the green belt is to let nature thrive around our city, and so we can have a more balanced relationship between the planets. And I just thought it was quite disappointing that we are getting to an uncertain time when there is a possibility we might build on the green belt in the future. And I think it's important that we ensure that never happens. Thank you.
Okay, so just to reiterate something that was on the agenda. Oh, that's the wrong chat. Councillors have a maximum of 2 minutes speaking time to keep up pace, so we don't overrun.
If it helps, I've got very little to say on this, other than that the key is the local plan. Personally, I wouldn't want to build on the green belt, but the key is the local plan that we referred to earlier, and that Josh and I will make sure your voice is heard. But equally, we need to put our voice, and that would not be our priority to build on the green belt.
Yeah, no, I can't say anything more than to agree with Mike. I don't think anyone ever inherently wants to build on the green belt. Well, certainly not councillors. I'm sure there are a lot of developers and some academic institutions that might want to develop certain parts of the green belt, but certainly no, as councillors, that's certainly the last thing that we want to do. I think there's an interesting sort of trade-off between what the eventual aim is, whether it's biodiversity, whether it's achieving net zero, or whether it's all around sustainability, whether we're looking for a balance between environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and financial sustainability that we've all got to factor in. I think it all comes back to on the list of priorities that building on the green belt is pushed as far down as possible. But yeah, it all comes back to this local plan process. I know there's been some concern over the amount of greenbelt sites put forward for discussion or consideration in the next local plan process. Most of those sites, especially take the Westfields in Newnham as an example, have been rejected for development for over the past 10 years, well before certainly I've been involved. in politics, and there's no reason that that's going to change. It's just a continued effort by the same developers to come back and keep trying to chip away at the green space. But yeah, at risk of going on, summary, local plan process, as well as climate change strategy that needs a lot more than 2 minutes to discuss all of the factors and the trade-offs.
Okay, so the next demand was committing to carbon neutrality well before 2030 and reporting transparently every 6 months.
I'm happy to go first on this one, if you like. The key, the aspiration has to be that, but I think the key is not number 2, but number 5. Unless there's a plan, we won't achieve number 2. And number 2 will cost billions. And that's just for Cambridge. So I think we've got to be, I mean, it'd be really wrong for me to pretend otherwise. So it's where do we find the cash? And that requires number 5 to be done. So as I've said before, to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, the sort of decisions that we as a population need to take, not just the council, are so significant that I think people don't really understand what that is. So for us, I can only talk about us as a council, we've already talked about retrofitting and the millions and millions and millions that would cost, which we haven't got. All new developments would have to take place and they'd have to be carbon neutral rather than passive house, which would cost millions and millions and millions and millions and millions. So it's about the money. And therefore, I think whilst my aspiration, and I'm sure everybody's would be for 2030, if at all possible, we have to have the plan. And I don't think the serious planning started yet. And that's what I'd like to see. So that would be my, sorry, so I'm wrapping up my answer to your question 2 with also my response to question 5. My focus would be on the 5th one, the plan, and then hold us to account for what we're doing to the plan. And that's the only way we'll actually achieve 2030. I'll stop there.
Yeah, again, spot on. The idea of a plan and the idea of a roadmap that I keep banging on about. Right? The difference between the overall target and how much can we do as quickly as possible is why I think we really need to have these individual plans for different parts of what we're going to need to decarbonize. So I mentioned earlier things like the council's office buildings, the council's vehicles, leisure centres, swimming pools, gyms, things like that will be much easier to decarbonize. And once we have the plan in place, and once we can roadmap to exactly when we decarbonize them, we might find that yes, we can get there for these things by 2030, or we can do 90, 80%. And then you bring in the other things, like we have indirect control over existing houses, new build houses, and also the investments we make as a council. And we do the same thing. We roadmap and we figure out what's we might, and with sort of emphasis on how much can we get done as quickly as possible. Can we get 80%, say, done by 2030? And then we just chip away at that last bit, the really complex bit that takes the most money as we move forward, and hopefully chip away at that 2050 target. And likewise, for the things that we only have slight control over or maybe have to influence, we build up plans for those and maybe work with the county council, from Ian and his colleagues, to things like Cambridgeshire and Peterborough and the mayor, and all the way up to the national government to be very specific on what we're trying to decarbonize, and also then throw on improving biodiversity and all around social, environmental and financial sustainability. For
moving on to demand number 3, which links wonderfully into money: ensure local climate finance, collecting carbon taxes to be spent on climate change programs.
So, I mean, I might be able to say a few things on this. I mean, Milton Keynes is perhaps the model you're thinking of. That has been discussed internally at the county council, but there's no sort of conclusions reached yet. when I originally read this, I was actually thinking of internal carbon pricing, which that is more advanced. Now there's actually a paper going next Thursday to the Environment and Sustainability Committee. So it'll be during the day, but it'll be online, so you can watch it later. And that is recommending to have an internal carbon price attached to all county council projects. So I think it's a start, because it's difficult, and deciding how you do that internal carbon price is a sort of thing in itself. So yeah, some progress is being made, and I hope that thing, that I can send you the details of that meeting next Thursday, so you can see what's being decided.
The only thing I would really add to Ian's comment, which probably is again, is more work needs doing on it, Luana, to see how we can do it properly and see how we can start to get the money we require. I suspect the route through this is going to be financial, if I'm honest, and that might actually hold more people to account than the other things. But so I'm starting to waffle there. I'll shut up.
So point number 4, supporting local renewables. Scale up into initiatives to convert all roofs in newly developed housing and current housing in Cambridge to living green, solar or heat reflective white, and to support sustainable buildings.
Yes. The thing I would say that's the issue. Sorry, I'm going to get a bit boring about retrofitting. Can I take a street where I live, Peveril Road, okay, which is in Abbey. So 200 houses there. Half belong to the council and half don't. So if we do our 100 and retrofit them, what happens to the people who don't have council houses, who have to pay £50,000 to retrofit their houses? And I think we need to address some of the issues about what we can do to support people living in private accommodation to retrofit. So that's, I think, another big issue that, again, one we have to address. Oddly enough, I think it's probably easier to put pressure on the council than it is to put pressure on private individuals.
It's Jonah and Marie-Claire here. Is there any creative thinking going on around this? I mean, in Cuba, where they have a whole lot less money than we do, they've actually set up a fund, which is kind of like a rotating fund, where you'll help, everybody chips in to help one place get retrofitted, and then the next one moves on as the money becomes, because of the amount that the house is worth more once it's nicer. And do you know if there's anybody doing any creative work like that?
Well, there is
actually looking at sort of working together.
I think there is, but I don't think it's being developed within Cambridge at the moment, not that I'm aware of, unless Josh or Ian are aware.
Well, what I was going to say, Mike, is of course where you've got that is on new developments, because on new developments there has to be a management company, and so that ties everyone into it. It'd be interesting to know how in Cuba I suspect I know the answer to this, and it's probably to do with their political and social structures, but how they managed to get to that agreement, because it requires some sort of legal framework. Well, it requires some way of guaranteeing that once everyone contributes the money, the first person doesn't then pull out after they get their house retrofitted, doesn't it? So you've got that in. Sorry, Mike, do you want to jump in?
Well, I was going to say, you probably know better than I think, hasn't there been some interesting work done in one of the villages? Is it Swaff and Bullbeck?
Yeah, so this is
yeah.
Scheme. That's also coming to, yeah, it's a good point. So that's also coming to the county council next week. So that's a community heat scheme that's being supported by the county council. It's got a slight problem with it, and it's been so successful it's massively oversubscribed and out of budget because it's supplemented by government, and the government money's run out essentially, and that's what the paper says next week. So I mean, but anyway, so just to go to the central point is that it will be interesting to look into the detail of the Cuba scheme and how they managed to do that, because you've got it in new developments, because there's that structure there that binds everyone together. They have to pay an amount in, and you can do that kind of levying that lets you do that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, if it is possible, and then of course, again, one of the demands is about climate finance. And so maybe it's possible that would be the sort of thing that climate finance would look at supporting, because obviously if people are so successful that they're oversubscribed, that's the right time to be doing something about climate change, and that's the right place to be investing.
So
Wouldn't disagree. I wouldn't disagree.
Point number, yep, we're on number 5. This is probably linked to the local plan, but make a publicly available climate plan for the next decade. Make regular updates on the plan and implement on local levels together with the advisory council.
Okay, it's not linked to the first one. It's linked to everything. This is the key one, Luana. I'm sorry to be boring about it. This is the one which will hold us all to account. And you're absolutely right. It has to be 6 months because it's about how we find the money. It's about everything. To me, this is the core to your demand. So I would wholly support it. It's a question of
work being done to create it.
It started, but too slowly. This needs a push.
As you say, on the county council side, necessarily because the counties obviously encapsulate the districts, that plan already, well, the strategy already exists and it is being reworked. So it's worth looking at that. Necessarily, the districts have come later, but there's no.
Can I just challenge you in when you say it's been done? So you've worked out how to reduce highways and transport costs. I think what's happening, what I think I'm saying is that with the planning, there are not broad brush statements. What you need with the plan is, okay, retrofitting 8,000 houses will cost X. Where's the money coming from and how are you going to find it? In the same way as with regards to, the county doing stuff around highways. So when are you going to build the cycle paths? And it's about, so it's beyond the statements. And I think the county is ahead of the city in this instance because the work that Cheryl French has done has been excellent. But it needs the detail. And without the detail, we can't be held to account.
So this is where we come to what I think is the main follow-up action from this meeting, and it's to get you guys involved in a specific workshop for the climate change strategy. Because yes, we have the bigger local plan, which sort of looks at 2024 onwards for I think 25 years. But we also have the city council's climate change strategies that go on for 5 years. I know so far it's not the 10 years that you're calling for. These are the sorts of things we need to have fed in to the process of building this strategy, so we then can consider, actually, can we extend this out to 10 years, and can we, like I sort of said, I mean, how much of our emissions can we roadmap to net zero or to sort of 10% within that 10-year time frame? So no, I think me and Mike have an action to bring you into that process within, it should be the next few weeks.
Okay.
I know just on the county bit, Mike's absolutely right. It's not a sort of complete plan. It doesn't tell us how we got there. I mean, if anyone had that right now, I think we'd all be jumping on it, wouldn't we? But there are some follow-up actions on the county side that, like Josh was saying, I might be able to work into some other projects I'm involved in at the county council that would look at specific bits of that strategy and say, how do you implement this and do it as a workshop? So it's another opportunity for you guys to be involved, you guys and girls to be involved.
So
okay. Oh, sorry. It's Jonah here. Why don't we take our demands to the workshop? It sounds like an amazing idea.
So I think the point that we're trying to, I mean, I'm very conscious that we're sort of 3 old boring white men here saying, we've got to work out the details. Well, I mean, Josh is probably still technically young, but Mike and I aren't. So I get that it's possibly a bit deflating, but the way to get this stuff is actually about the detail. It's not about the high level demands. It's about digging into that in the workshop and picking one of those things and working for the detail and actually coming out with an output that achieves something. And that actually is inspiring. So I don't want you to I'm just very conscious about you all getting disheartened by us constantly saying it's about the money, it's about the strategy and all this sort of stuff. And it really is about achieving stuff.
Point number 6, making green transport accessible. Using inspiration from previous successful initiatives, make buses and transport systems net zero, then reduce the cost of public transport to make it more reliable. Give free access to underprivileged groups, such as the elderly, children, and the disabled.
I won't repeat too much of what I've already said, but I think partly what's missing from this is the comment about the active travel schemes that I think Ginny asked about last time, the road closures and that sort of thing. So I'd really like it if you could include something about that in there. And then I know it's boring, but the mayor is the person who controls fundamentally has the biggest levers on bus usage. But I wonder if an action that could come out of this would maybe to sort of you to all think about where you'd want, which sort of route you'd want to look at in terms of if you were going to pick sort of a particular route to push Stagecoach to have a completely green rather than sort of partly green bus, and that might give you something to sort of lock into with a bit of more definitive outcomes. I wonder if Michael, Josh wants to add anything.
Only very again, I should really to say that use a disaster that is COVID to look at where there is street closures and how we might roll them into something more. I think Dave Bagent was talking about this last time in relation to Mill Road. I think there might be ways of identifying particular places. The other initiative I think might be worth looking at is a thing called Living Streets, which is starting to be revamped again within Cambridge, which is more than, so it's also about reducing cars, but it's also about bringing people out onto the streets in a way that is more community focused. And I would encourage us to have a look at that maybe collectively.
Okay, the final demand, support local and independent businesses, giving them full advice and support, both physically and financially.
I think again to pick up on what I've the way I've tried to describe at least a kind of climate strategy from the city council's viewpoint. So business is certainly one of those pillars, I guess, and I think we established roughly business and industry is about a third of emissions in the city and kind of area of Cambridge. And obviously, as a city council, we don't control the businesses, but we do have very, very strong and close partnerships with those businesses. And we have a few, there are a few sort of groups that bring together leaders from the council and from a variety of different businesses. And we also have the Cambridge Bid, which is an association of many businesses in Cambridge. And there has just been, I'm sure some of you might have tuned into the launch of the Cambridge Climate Charter, which came from a group called Cambridge Carbon Footprint, which is a website. I don't know if while I'm speaking, someone's able to throw the link into the chat, or we can just we can send it to you in an email, which essentially allows individuals and businesses to sign up to the Cambridge Climate Charter. But it's not just kind of warm words and promises. It actually lets you calculate your carbon footprint as a person or business, and it actually has a lot of very specific things that you or a business can do to reduce that, and allows you, thank you Ian, that's in the chat now, and allows you to set targets based on your life, what's achievable, whether it's giving up a little bit of meat or driving one less day a week or driving not at all, those kinds of things. But that's not just it. There are such a variety of ways that the city council and all councils and you all can engage with businesses. And yeah, as it's 1 minute to 6, let's hash all of these out in the next couple of weeks.
I won't say anything more, just very quickly. South Cambs are doing a lot of stuff on this and have a number of grants, so it's worth looking at what they're doing, what that council's doing, South Cambridge, and I can send you some of that detail.
So just before we, I assume, finish, Magnus is going to read out a poem that was originally read out by Arthur in one of our previous strikes last year.
Imagining my future, if we fail. It's February and it's 2070. I'm 63 years old. I'm a survivor. Let me tell you a little bit about my life. When I was 12 years old in 2019, I first realised the importance and danger of climate change. I went on school strikes and joined actions. We failed. The fossil fuel industry was too powerful. The government seemed unable to make long-term plans, and most ordinary people were too uninformed. And it was as if there was a media blackout. People just carried on as if there was nothing happening, and the planet continued to heat up. In 2035, we had the first great heat wave. The temperature here in Cambridge hit 49 degrees Celsius in shade. That was the year we lost all our songbirds. The mornings from then on were silent. I tell my grandchildren stories about them, how I miss them. Sea levels had been continuously rising, and by 2050, London was flooding so often that people started to leave in their millions. More and more migrants came to Cambridge or passed through, looking for food or shelter. They weren't from another country. They were our own people, millions of them. Supermarkets were looted, houses were raided, and then the famine came. And heat waves became long, regular, and lethal. By 2050, over 500,000 people died each year because of climate change worldwide. And now nearly 750,000 do. I just find it hard to believe that all the world's leaders and leaders of the fossil fuel industries did nothing about climate change despite the evidence. I find it hard to believe that they just ignored us and carried on as if it was nothing happening. I just find it hard to believe that they left the world to burn.
Clapping, sorry, but I'm on mute, so it didn't work.
So that concludes today's meeting. Only 4 minutes overrun. Surprising.
Can I make a suggestion?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So it looks like so far over the last 2 meetings we've had, you could count the youth strikers being the councillors to us on Friday afternoon. It seems like it does seem like the important decision making is taking place and in the council away from these meetings. So I was wondering, maybe potentially would we be able to bring the youth strikers to the council, the councillors next time, and perhaps have youth strikers sitting on one of the meetings to make a decision and having our voice directly heard before votes are casted.
I mean, absolutely. So not just can we involve you in workshops and in the drafting of the strategy, and that drafting will also involve the experts, not just who work within the council, but we'll bring in the experts from all the universities that we have in Cambridge and all the different organizations and businesses. We'll each have the answers to kind of pick and go into the detail that me, Ian, and Mike can't, looking at more of a higher level. But also in terms of sitting on our actual meetings, we can absolutely bring you guys in to ask. It would probably be a public questions where you're allowed to essentially come and propose and demand that we do better. I mean, whether that's at the Environment Committee, where we might be discussing. So in March, once we've come up with a climate change strategy, that will have to be voted on. If you guys aren't happy with anything, we can absolutely bring you into that debate and be heard before we vote it through. And also in February, when, say, the council puts, again, it doesn't sound the most exciting, but when the council puts forward its budget and has a lot of very detailed items in there, a lot of which will relate to climate change and your demands, we can bring you in to try explain and say, is this good enough? Are you happy with this? And let you speak to us and let you be part of that debate. 100%.
I think I would support what Josh says. I think we've got to find a way. Ironically, a way that works better for you will be a way that works better for us as adults, oddly enough. Josh and I had the joy of having 5 hours of full council last night. I wouldn't want to inflict that on you, but that's where the decisions are made. So we've got to find a way that's better. and that creates a further challenge, if I'm honest, Sinead. So again, maybe if Josh and I can have a chat and then come back with maybe some proposals. But I think, again, I wouldn't disagree with Josh. It's back to your residents at Cambridge. You should be able to hold me to account for what the budget is. That's quite right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's as it should be. So but we've got to find a way of making it meaningful, I think. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally agree with what Mike's just said. Because I can highlight these two papers to come to committee next Thursday. I'm not sure how much interest there would be in you coming and speaking about those papers, because they're very specific things. It might be, and I'm happy to follow it up. But I completely agree with Mike. It's got to be a way that's productive for you, and you feel like you've used your time effectively.
So, Ginny, did you want to add something? Okay. So that concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much for attending and coming. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you. See you soon.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
See you soon.
Thank you.